Good afternoon, I'm Lucy Pegler from Burgess Salmon. This afternoon's first session is on influencing driver behaviour, and I'm delighted to welcome to the stage James Harris, Managing Director of Elgin.
Good morning. Yeah, we've all seen signs like that, I think. And anybody who is in the unfortunate position of having bought a sat-nav device about 10 years ago, or even possibly 6 or 7 years ago, knows why signs like that exist. If you don't have live information updating into your sat-nav, the likelihood is it's going to send you down the wrong road. It's not going to tell you about roads that are closed. It's not going to tell you about disruptions on the network that you might want to know about if you're relying on a sat-nav to take you from A to B. And I think this represents a massive failure, a failure of technology providers to join the dots between the very sophisticated technology that's used by road authorities to manage the road network and the equally, if not infinitely more sophisticated technology that's available to consumers on the dashboards of their cars and increasingly in a commoditized way on smartphones. Can everyone hear me okay? Just out of interest, can I have a show of hands? How many people drove here today? And could you keep your hand up if you used sat-nav or any kind of navigation aid during any part of your journey? Okay, that wasn't very scientific because everyone's a bit like this, but I think it was around about half. Interestingly, there's a real paucity of statistics around the use of sat-nav technology, but anecdotally, 5 years ago, most of my friends and family rarely used a sat-nav. Now, I don't know anyone in my circle of family and friends who don't use some form of sat-nav technology on a regular basis. So when we're talking about influencing driver behaviour, this is a hugely important channel. And I think signs like this will become a thing of the past. I think they have to become a thing of the past. So this rather scary image is a snapshot of all the road closures and diversion routes that have been planned through using Elgin technology, using something called Traffic Management App, across East Anglia. It's the area just north of London, I think, extending out to Hertfordshire. It's just a random snapshot of 3 months' worth of closures. And this does by no means represent all closures on the road network, only those that are significant enough for those local highway authorities to have planned them, to have plotted them on a map and to be managing them in some way. And that's only a proportion of the closures. And I can guarantee you that very, very few of these will have been communicated by those road authorities to the providers of sat-nav technology in anything like a real-time or closely managed way. So we see things like this. I mean, this sign's actually been concreted into the ground. So confident is the road authority that sat-nav technology isn't going to be able to help drivers get from A to B. This is a permanent fixture. But, you know, joking aside, ignore sat-nav is not an instruction that driverless cars are going to be able to work with. We need better instruction sets going into sat-nav technology because this is a very important channel not only for drivers, but increasingly in the future for the vehicles themselves. And talking of communication channels, I'm not sure that the communication with the driver has really moved on much in the last 30 years, maybe even 50 years. Static, analog signage has been around since the birth of the motor car. Obviously, dynamic digital signage is available at vast expense with huge investment in roadside infrastructure, which simply isn't scalable or extensible across the local road network. I was told 5 minutes before this presentation, I was grumbling to one of the providers of sat-nav technology who's in the auditorium about the lack of statistics and evidence around the way people use sat-navs. And I was told that according to their research, 90% of drivers ignore VMS and will trust their sat-nav if they happen to be using one in preference to a VMS. Obviously, there are things like traffic radio. Who here uses traffic radio anymore? I think all radios in cars are still fitted with a button that you can activate it. I've got to own up, I've never used traffic radio in my life. So these things are really important as a communication channel. Anecdotally, as I've said, it's my very strong view that the use of sat-nav is increasing in society, but I think probably a more important trend is that sat-navs are being used more routinely. So when I jump in the car and drive from my home in West Oxfordshire to Didcot Parkway Station, I will always have my sat-nav on. And the reason for that is that it will tell me about disruptions to my journey, accidents, planned disruptions that are just coming into force, like road closures. And it will do so pretty reliably. And this is a channel that I think road authorities need to make much more use of in order to harness the power to influence drivers on the road network. Sat-navs really, I think, take 3 instruction sets currently in order to determine the best route to take drivers. There's live traffic flow information, insanely powerful big data that is now actually commoditized, really. It's collected in a variety of ways, floating vehicle data, ANPR, etc. And that will tell a sat-nav device about congestion. It will be one of the factors that's factored into an algorithm that determines getting the vehicle from A to B in the fastest way. An emerging area of data in this area is crowdsourced data, and I won't say anything about that because one of the great thought leaders in this industry, a brilliant and innovative company called Waze, is up next, and there's nothing I can say about crowdsourcing information that they don't know 10 times as much about. But the final category, and the area that I think is really underexploited, is official, authoritative, operational information coming from road authorities that I think is profoundly underexploited. And at Elgin, we've kind of made it our mission to try and gather as much of that information into one single database as possible. We're known, I think, mainly for providing roadworks.org, the national roadworks database. We've enhanced that with information about road closures and diversion routes, with official sources of incident data, primarily coming from the strategic highway authorities. We've got embedded relationships with 170 out of the 174 local highway authorities. We're increasingly sourcing data directly from utilities around emergency works and things that don't make their way into those roadworks databases. And we're engaging directly with the organisers of large mass participation events like London Marathon and Ride London and those sorts of events. But the truth is that when you put all this data together, not much of it is actually usable for drivers. It's not accurate enough, it's not real-time enough, it's not precise enough. And so we spent quite a lot of time over the last year working on real-time variants of this database. We partnered with TomTom to try and correlate the cause of congestion back to individual roadworks, and we've come up with the first national map of the actual real-time congestion associated with every roadworks that's going on in the country. So the map on the left is St Albans, and the map on the right is also St Albans, same time of day. The difference is the map on the left shows all of the planned disruptions that might be causing problems for traffic. The map on the right not only shows areas of severe and moderate congestion, shaded red and amber, but it also links that information back to the roadworks that are almost certainly causing that congestion. And I think it's true to say that the main benefit here really is for the road authorities to have a tool that allows them to look at this stuff in real time and to manage and optimize the road network. But there is also a benefit in communicating the cause of congestion to drivers. But the game changer is road closures. These are the things that cause the biggest disruption to drivers, and this is the greatest opportunity for highway authorities to actually make a difference in the communication of disruption to drivers. If you manage the M20, wouldn't it be nice to tell everyone north of the Watford Gap when it's closed, when they're about to leave on holiday? It's immensely powerful to be able to create a direct channel from the guys in hard hats who are actually managing the situation on the ground, putting the first cone out and taking the last cone away, and to directly syndicate that to sat-nav devices and to authoritatively inform that channel. So we're working very closely with Google in particular on this project. We have this tool, Traffic Management App, which I showed you the screenshot earlier of all of the planned road closures, all of the things that theoretically are taking place. We've created a real-time variant of that, and we've been trialing it in the market over the last year. We trialed it with London Marathon, with Ride London, with a big cycling event more recently in Birmingham called Velo Birmingham, with a number of local highway authorities. We've trialled it on the strategic road network of Wales, and we're going to be looking to roll it out across the trunk route network of Wales over the course of next year. And we're just teeing up a trial with Highways England on the M1 smart motorway scheme around Nottinghamshire. That's likely to start soon. And what we're doing is really stress testing this technology to see whether or not it does indeed provide a really accurate fix as to the moment that roads are closed, the moment they're reopened, and to do so in really the harshest and most extreme conditions. Ride London, I think, was 200 separate road closures, effectively a massively complicated rolling road closure, hugely disruptive potentially to the residents of Surrey and London, but communicated in near real time onto Google Maps. Google Maps has 1 billion users worldwide. Google, like all big corporate organizations, is quite secretive about these things. I haven't been able to get information about how many drivers use Google Maps as a sat-nav device, but I know that I'm one of them, and I think a lot of people are too. So Google's an incredibly powerful channel to drivers, and this initiative in terms of creating a direct link from those managing closures to the sat-nav community encompasses not just Google, but TomTom here, and hopefully shortly Waze, who will be speaking after me. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight into how our services are evolving, how we're focused on this challenge of creating a direct channel from the most authoritative and potentially accurate sources of disruption information through to the technologies that increasingly drivers are using and trusting. And this is obviously really significant in the context of driverless vehicles, because driverless vehicles are going to need accurate, real-time and authoritative instruction sets to determine the best route, to determine when to set off. And also, potentially, driverless vehicles represent a great opportunity to behave in a more socially beneficial way. Now, one of the things that I keep nagging TomTom and Google about is when are you going to take all these wonderful diversion routes that are lovingly plotted into Traffic Management App and are curated with every bit as much care and detail and attention as the closures themselves. Road authorities have the local knowledge. They know the best route to divert traffic onto. And if everyone's head down looking at their sat-nav and the sat-nav's just determining the optimal route according to its internal algorithm, there's a great opportunity there to influence that algorithm with the authorized diversion route. This is a mock-up, by the way. We're not able to do this today, but I hope that in the future, Elgin, in its own small way, may be able to influence the sat-nav community to actually take note of diversion routes and to use them to influence driver behavior. Hopefully, Paul, that was on time. I was threatened with being dragged off the stage if I was a minute over, so thank you very much. I really should introduce Finley from Waze, this fantastic company that I mentioned earlier, for what will be a very inspirational talk, I'm sure.